civic freedoms. Yet, despite these risks, human rights defenders continue to push back, often at great personal cost. A new report by Forum Asia, Defending in Numbers, Reclaiming Civic Space, Unbroken Voices, highlights the worsening conditions across Indonesia, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, while also spotlighting the resilience of those who refuse to be silenced. And as I said, joining us live from Bangkok is Joon Lee, Human Rights Defenders Program Officer at Forum Asia. Joon Lee, good morning and welcome to Radio Islam International.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me today.
Us. So let's look at the patterns in civic space restrictions. You've been tracking civic space across Asia. What broad patterns are you seeing in how governments are restricting public freedom?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that question. Yes, so as you already mentioned, so we published the 6th edition of our biannual publication, Defending in Numbers, which analyzes the trends of violations against HRDs in Asia. So we do have some spotlight on Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka with our national chapters, but it actually tracks all the regional trends across Asia. And as you have rightly mentioned, this year, covering the years of 2023 and 24, the subtitle of the publication is Reclaiming Civic Space, Unbroken Voices. And this focuses on the hopeful message of reclaiming the civic space, but it also insinuates that the civic space is being taken over and is shrinking. So some things that I wanted to mention about the regional trends across Asia is that we are seeing an increase of authoritarianism and state-mandated violence or violence with impunity every year. We're also seeing a securitization of civic space and oppression through legal means, whether that be media workers, journalists, or defenders working in different areas, environmental justice, particularly, or on gender justice. So yeah, on different realms of human rights and civic space. Some of the ways that are most commonly used to suppress human rights defenders in Asia that we have recorded and analyzed in this year's edition, thus restricting civic space, are judicial harassment, including arrest and detention, many of which are arbitrarily done. We have also noted physical violence, as well as intimidation, threats, and different kinds of censorship and surveillance, as well as the actual restrictions on the movement of the defenders. We are also noting an alarming increase in transnational oppression, meaning that the governments or different entities across governments are collaborating with each other. The areas of human rights that are most impacted, we have noted, are also environmental, land, indigenous, community-based defenders are really one of the most impacted defenders. Also, women human rights defenders and defenders who are working on gender justice, including sexual orientation and gender identity, on pro-democracy defenders. And we're also seeing an alarming increase of harassment on youth and student defenders, as well as media workers who are specializing in human rights, environmental justice, corporate responsibility, and other kinds of investigative work. But we're also seeing some positive just one more thing. Some positive developments on the civic space is some success stories of protest movements. So the example of South Korea, where after the one-day martial law attempt, all of the people have gone out on the streets, and there was a change in government as a result of that. We're also seeing, in gradient, but gradually more attempt to protect human rights defenders on the government level, even though it's usually municipality or local level. So, for example, there are some ordinances that are being passed in the Philippines.
So, what are some of the most concerning tactics that governments are using to suppress civil society and dissent?
Yeah. Yes. So the governments, we what we have noted is that there's a widespread use of repressive laws that are restricting some of the fundamental rights, most primarily the freedom of expression and the freedom of assembly and association. There are many laws that are being used, such as the National Security Act or the Cybersecurity Act, that are being used to criminalize human rights defenders when they're using their advocacy platforms. Some of the examples would be Hong Kong, also Sri Lanka. They have been making promises that they will revise their National Security Act, but then as of now, we do not see a very big improvement in that. We are also seeing state-mandated violence. So some of the examples of this would be in Pakistan and Bangladesh. So for example, last year, with the so-called July Revolution, there have been, when people were going out on the streets with their protest against the government, there have been the use of a lot of physical violence from the state authorities against these protesters. We have also seen digital and media oppression, again, primarily through the use of repressive laws. And as I have already mentioned, we're seeing examples of transnational repression through means of detention or kidnapping and abduction by state authorities in a friend, I guess, country. When so in our Defending in Numbers publication, we have a section that is specifically on perpetrators, and state actors is one of the noted perpetrators. So this include police, judiciary agents, as well as military and armed forces. We have noted that they are actually the primary perpetrators in committing these violations against human rights defenders. Also, one other thing is they are also often collaborating with non-state actors. Here, I mean, very oftentimes corporations or extremist groups. So they would be working together with corporations to detain and judicially harass or even impose physical violence on the defenders for the work that they're doing against the corporations, for example. The culture of impunity and lack of investigation or accountability on these violations is also another very big alarming issue.
And then just quickly, hey Joon, looking at the role of journalism, why is it protecting independent journalism so critical to safeguarding civic space in Asia today?
Yes, well, so according to our portal, where we monitor and record violations against the defenders in Asia, which is the data that feeds into our Defending in Numbers analysis, actually media workers and journalists are the number one group of defenders that have faced actually the highest number of violations in the region. They play a very key role and they contribute significantly to exposing human rights violations, the corruption, whether that be by corporations or by the government, and other kinds of illegal practices. And as a result of their investigative work, and because they're exposing a lot of these human rights violations, in turn, they're also facing, I think they're most exposed to these violations themselves as well. For example, in countries like Bangladesh and Indonesia, when they were covering peaceful demonstration, that also exposed them to other violations, such as judicial harassment, as well as intimidation and threats, but also physical violence, which even amounted to death in sometimes. In other cases, the journalist can also be falsely framed as aiding terrorists, for example. So, for example, in the form of being red tagged, being framed as terrorists, like whether that might be by the public or by the perpetrators. And some of the examples, like in countries like the Philippines. So I think this is why they're playing such a significant role in the region in exposing these violations, and because of that, they're also exposed to the violations themselves.
Hey, Joon Lee, Human Rights Defenders Program Officer at Forum Asia, thank you very much for joining us this morning and for sharing your analysis with us. Much appreciated. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a lovely day and a lovely morning and day as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And time now for our news headlines with Nina Bambeni.